Exclusivism can't be true. Why? Because if it is, then Christopher Hitchens is right.
And over us to supervise this is installed a celestial dictatorship, a kind of divine North Korea.
Dr. Hare Kṛṣṇa elaborates on this point further.
If, and this is not just about one religion and another, if the God of the fanatics, if the God of certain fanatics, if that, if God was really like that, God would be the most evil being ever conceived of by a human mind.
Welcome to Theology Unleashed. I'm Arjuna, and today we're looking at exclusivism and how it can't be true, given that God is all-loving. God being all-loving is a pretty universal religious claim, and I would argue that it's a primary religious claim. Therefore, beliefs which contradict God being all-loving should be rejected or interpreted so as to harmonize with God being all-loving. However, many religious people accept conceptions of God which contradict God being all-loving. Exclusivism is one such example of this. Exclusivism has several different versions, but essentially it's the claim that only one religion is capable of delivering salvation. Some versions of it hold that members of other religions are destined to eternal torment in hell. Some other versions of it hold that those who don't participate in the one true religion will be subject to a kind of cosmic eugenics. This is a belief some Christians hold. It's the idea that those who do not attain a sufficient level of perfection in this one short lifetime will be annihilated rather than suffer in hell for eternity. It's often called annihilationism, but I think the word cosmic eugenics is far more fitting because the negative emotional connotation the word has is warranted. Eugenics is the practice of improving the gene pool by only allowing those with desirable genes to reproduce, or by killing those with undesirable genes. Eugenics is widely seen as reprehensible, and I don't see why God doing the same thing should be seen any differently. It would make far more sense for God to be interested in the quality of our love and our sincerity, rather than what church we happen to go to or doctrine we pledge allegiance to. And for God to give us unlimited opportunities to come back to Him. Why on earth would an all-loving God send us to eternal torment or annihilate us simply because we didn't get it right in this one lifetime? Since God being all-loving is a primary claim, we must reject conceptions of God which are incompatible with this. Professor Hare Kṛṣṇa elaborates on this point further.
Here's the argument, basically. God is infinitely great. Therefore, the greatest conception of God is closest to the truth. It's like if you have an infinite number, then the highest finite number is, in a sense, going toward infinity. So the idea here is that if the greatest being imaginable is God, how could the most evil being imaginable be God? And I will give you 10 seconds here. If you can think of a more evil being, we'll give you a free cookie. But the point is, try to imagine something more evil than torturing your own children forever just because they slightly misunderstood you. And what's more evil than that?
One of my gripes with atheist activists is how they try to draw from many of their arguments conclusions which do not follow. Some of these arguments I like, but I can't agree with some of their conclusions because they aren't justified.
And what if we pick the wrong religion? Every week we're just making God madder and madder.
Testify!
Here's one example of an atheist activist taking an argument too far. Here's Alex O'Connor of Cosmic Skeptic.
You only have to read a few select verses from the Old Testament to realize that God is never particularly happy when people decide to pray to the wrong deity. Okay, the first commandment is, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." Not, "Thou shalt not deny me." Not, "Thou shalt believe in me," but "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." And this implies that which God you decide to pray to is at least as important and possibly more important than choosing to pray to a God at all. And in this respect, atheists might actually be better off than people who are part of the wrong religion?
No. It could just be that they're all praying to the same God and they happen to be mistaken in thinking that they're praying to different gods. If they are all praying to the same God and God is accepting their love, then they are all benefited. Now, I have to be fair and point out that he is simply responding to arguments bandied about by many theists. But if he wants to claim, as many skeptics do, to be a bastion of rationality, then he should give theism a fair trial rather than responding to a weak argument. Just because a certain theistic belief is common or popular does not mean it's the only one or the strongest one. Of course, many Christians do have this exclusivist view based on verses like the one he quoted about God wanting us to have no idols before him. But there are other ways of interpreting those biblical statements, which are far more rational and which are impervious to his argument. It makes far more sense that all the different monotheistic religions are worshipping the same God, but simply have different conceptions of him, either due to misunderstandings or due to focusing on different features of God. There's an old analogy which is used to illustrate this point of several blind men all holding different parts of an elephant's body and arguing that the elephant has different qualities. One of them holds the tail and argues that it's like a rope. One of them holds the leg and argues that it's like a trunk. A third one holds the belly and argues that it's like a wall. And one of them holds the trunk and argues that it's like a hose. In a similar way, the various world religions, even Buddhism and other versions of impersonalism, are all focusing on different aspects of the absolute. Some of them simply lack the bigger picture in order to see how they all tie in together. The fact that they argue is just a product of their immaturity, just as the blind men would give up their arguing if they had their sight restored and were able to understand that all of them were correct and they were talking about an elephant. So, while I appreciate the arguments these atheist activists put forward to show that exclusivism is irrational, we need to be clear that all these arguments do is show that theologies which include exclusivism have problems. If they get rid of their exclusivism, the whole rest of the theology may be fine. This argument does not damn an entire theology. All it damns is one aspect of the theology. Of course, many other theologies do have problems, but this argument tells us nothing about that. Those problems need to be examined on their own. These atheists are also guilty of a straw man fallacy in the way they wield this argument, because they go after religions which contain this irrationality, but ignore the fact that there are several theologies which are impervious to this argument because they hold inclusivism, not exclusivism. Inclusivism also has several different versions, but essentially it's the idea that there is one truth about God and various religions can benefit people in as much as they converge on that truth. Among all the world religions, you'll find people who accept inclusivism and reject exclusivism. But there are a number of theologies which explicitly state inclusivism in their doctrine. One example of this is the Gaudiya Vaishnava Bhakti tradition. Inclusivism has several different versions, but essentially it's the idea that there is one truth about God and the various world religions can benefit people in as much as they converge on that truth. Usually people that accept inclusivism believe that their religion is true and other religions are true and beneficial in as much as they agree with their own religion. The version of inclusivism which I accept, and the one presented by Srila Prabhupada, the founder of the Hare Kṛṣṇa movement in the West, is that God is interested in your love and your merit, and that you can measure the value of a religion by how well it helps us to develop our love of God.
So these three names, we are chanting Hare Kṛṣṇa. So if you think, oh, this is Indian name, this is Hindu name, why shall I chant? Why shall I chant the Hindu name? There are some sectarian people, they may think like, but Lord Caitanya says it doesn't matter. If you have got any bona fide name of God, you chant that. But you chant. Do not think that this movement is a proselytizing movement from Christian to Hindu or Hindu. No. You remain Christian, Hindu, Jew, or Mohammedan, it doesn't matter. Our process is that if you are really to perfect your human form of life, then try to love, develop your dormant love of God. That is perfection of it.
You can see Srila Prabhupada is focusing on universal principles and explaining how it doesn't matter what religious affiliations you have. What matters is simply that you're developing your love of God. So, in conclusion, exclusivism can't be true because it's incompatible with God being all-loving, and God being all-loving is a primary claim. Arguments which show exclusivism to be irrational are valid, but they only go so far, because there are theologies which are impervious to these arguments due to them holding inclusivism and rejecting exclusivism. Thanks for the view. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hare Krishna.